Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host, Sri Iyer. Today I have a new guest. He is a techie by profession, but he's also the author of the book, What Every Hindu Needs to Know About Christianity. Welcome, Kalavai Venkat. Venkatji, Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskaram, Sri Iyerji. Pleasure to meet you.
And Venkatji, my apologies. Somehow we were going to get together a long time ago. It's been slipping one after the other, but finally we've gotten together today. And viewers, we're going to have a very interesting discussion because we're going to dissect what's really going on in the US campuses. The number now has exceeded 50. Colombia was where the start was, and we know that a lot of things have happened in Colombia. In fact, in one other campus, a professor was brought down to the ground. The policeman didn't care who she was. And basically, this is getting into a next league, next orbit. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But I wanted Venkatji to give us a perspective because this is not something that is just localized to this one campus or one outburst. It's been going on for a long time. So I would like him to take a look at it from a perspective from what has happened in the past. And then we come to the current and then we'll see how it goes forward. So Venkatji, I just wanted to give this long winding introduction because people need to understand that this is not the first time we are seeing this. Such things have happened in the past also. Take us back a little bit to when you think you would like to see the detection of this left. It was first the left, and then they have kind of added more and more troops now. Over to you, sir.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Pleasure to be on your channel, Sri Iyerji, and thanks for inviting me. And I think going back, right, I think if we were to really rewind and go back about 5-6 decades, I think a lot of this started with the hippie revolution during the Vietnam War, when a lot of the college students were protesting against the war. And that was the time when America started, or the American left started realizing the accretive model of bringing all the disparate identity groups, all the different ideological groups together. So, for example, they had the blacks, they had the religious minorities, then they had the anti-war groups, everyone. They started bringing them sometime around that time. But at the time, the experiment was not as widespread or as detailed as it is now. Okay. So what changed a lot was during the 90s and even more importantly during the Obama era, when they started bringing in a lot of the Muslim groups and started normalizing Islam in the US campuses. Okay? And this actually alarmed a lot of people, including, you may be familiar with Professor Salim Mansoor. He was a political science professor at the University of West Ontario. And around 2011 or 12, he goes to the Canadian House of Commons and then he warns them about bringing in a lot of Muslim immigrants into the country. Okay. And he makes a very important observation. He says all the Muslims are either radicals or at best conservatives. And all of them are at odds with the Western values and in particular the Canadian liberal values. Okay. And in fact, he goes to the extent of making the appeal, close the border to Muslim immigrants. So this alarmed a lot of people. Okay. So, and of course, nobody paid heed to him. That's a different story. And then this suited a lot of people because the corporates benefited a lot by bringing in many Muslims. And we just think of them as, look, they brought them in as cheap labor, but that's not the only story, right? And then part of that is for the corporations, when you bring them in, who's going to provide them healthcare and other benefits? Okay, and all of that goes out of tax dollar, but it's a private sector that benefits out of that. Then, for the left-wing politicians, we all know that most of the elections are decided by a difference of 0.5% or 1% of vote one way or the other. And if you are going to bring in a few million Muslim immigrants into this country, then they are going to help tilt the balance in elections, at least in swing states. And like states like Michigan are going to be very critical for that, and they're going to play a critical role in that. And that was the reason why this was encouraged systematically. And they were playing on top of this on residual white guilt, right? About 50 years ago, there was a lot of racism in this country. Okay, nobody is denying that, right? If you went back to 1970s or 1960s, there was racism in this country. But the America of 2024 is not the US of 1970. That's the simple truth. Otherwise, you won't have so many Chinese, so many Indians dominating the entire tech sector in the Silicon Valley. Okay, not only as techies, but also as CEOs, as startup venture capitalists, and this is the case even in the Wall Street, because I do most of my work for Wall Street banks. And then once again, what you find is a total dominance by Indians and Chinese who are coming and working there, and who have risen all the way to the top. Okay, so now the US of 2024 is absolutely not a racist country, and this is actually a very welcoming place. This actually rewards meritocracy. If you worked hard, you could do well. But this is where the real challenges begin to manifest. Okay, there are communities that invested in education. Okay, because you don't become successful overnight. Okay, you become successful because your parents invested their time in bringing you up, and then you paid attention to all the real subjects like STEM or finance, accounting, economics, and all these things, and then you spent your childhood studying arts. It could be music, it could be dance, it could be language, grammar, anything. You spend time doing all those things, and then your success is the fruit of all of this labor. Okay, and it's not just an individual effort, it's the effort of the family. Your siblings put in effort into this, and then you build an overall culture, right? Overall culture of excellence. And this is not only limited to the Indians and Chinese. If you look at the Jewish people, especially the Ashkenazi Jews, for 2000 years, they have been persecuted. Okay, so in all of Europe. Yet, what you find is the Ashkenazi Jews, whenever, even though they were ghettoized, they were confined to the ghettos, they would become pianists, they would become your watchmakers, okay, they would become your poets, they would become your philosophers, okay. And as a result of that, as soon as they walked out of the gas chambers in 1945, they walked into Wall Street, they became bankers, they became your musicians and everything, okay. So there is this culture of excellence which some communities invested in and some communities did not, okay. And this is the sad reality, and this is the reality we have seen everywhere, okay. And this could happen in a matter of few decades, okay. Those who invest thrive overall as a community, those who don't do not thrive. And we see that in Israel, for example, the population of Israel is about 9 million, okay. Out of that, about 2.5 millions are Arab Muslims, the remaining about 6 million or 7 million are Jewish people, okay. The Jewish people do extraordinarily well when it comes to academics, when it comes to startup everything, and the Arab Muslims don't, okay. And the difference is one of the two doesn't educate their daughters. Go ahead, sorry.
So, Venkat, when you said 9.5 million, it is the entire Israel, including Gaza, is it?
Correct.
Okay. Because
this
the Israel,
not excluding Gaza,
yeah.
Gaza, this is 9 million.
Yeah, if you set aside the Gaza for a minute, just for argument's sake, viewers, I just want to make sure that you understand that close to remaining, let's say 7 million, of that 20% are not Jews, non-Jews. Those could be Arabs, those could be Palestinians, those could be people of other religions. Everybody has the same vision that they want a progressive and a prosperous Israel. I just want to make sure people understand it's not a homogeneous state. Israel is not a homogeneous state. Back to you, sir.
It's not a homogeneous state, and I have lived and worked in Israel in the late 90s. Okay, so I have a lot of familiarity with their culture, with their society. It's not a homogeneous state, and even among the Jewish people, roughly about 30% of them are Ashkenazi Jews. Okay, the remaining are, the Sephardic Jews and others who are basically Jews of Arab descent, right? Who came from within there. So they are very, very diverse, very multi-ethnic society, and like you mentioned, about 20%, 25% of them are Arab Muslims, Druids, and others. Okay, predominantly it's the Arab Muslims. Okay, and now the opportunities are open to everyone. Okay, everyone could go to the same colleges. Everyone has access to the same infrastructure, healthcare, everything. But when it comes to success, there is a differential. It's the Jews that do extraordinarily well compared to the Arab Muslims. Okay, and the reason for that is simple. Okay, Jewish people have a culture of investing, just like the Indians, just like the Chinese. They have a culture of nurturing the family. Okay, where one generation makes investment in the next. Okay, and then religion, it plays a spiritual role in their upbringing, but it's not what shapes their life. It's not an ideology from 1400 years ago that shapes their thinking today. Okay, so that contributes to the Jewish success. Now, that's not the same with the Arab Muslims, even those living within the state of Israel. In fact, they enjoy the most freedom and the most access to all the technology, infrastructure, everything. But what you notice is that they are not doing as well. Okay, it's not because of any discrimination against them, but it is because they don't take as much of initiative. In fact, the same applies to the US too. In fact, I always ask whenever somebody brings up the question of, the US is not a state of equities and all these things. My simple question is, why is that we Indians and Chinese are in this country in the first place? Okay. Because we started coming here in large numbers in the late 80s to early 90s. Okay, before that, a few of us came, but most of us came only from the 90s onwards. Okay, for example, the underrepresented minorities of this country, like the blacks or the Hispanics, they had access to the best colleges of the United States. Okay, they could have studied the same computing, same electronics, same semiconductors, management, everything, and they could have thrived, and they would be dominating the Silicon Valley and Wall Street. Okay, whereas the colleges in India were by no means comparable to the ones in the US. Okay, in terms of infrastructure, but the difference was living in India or living in China. We Chinese and Indians, we put in a lot of effort in upskilling ourselves and in owning up, and we studied, we burnt the late night oil, and then that's the reason we started dominating. Okay, at the end of the day, there is something called owning up and succeeding, and this is something very easy to emulate, Shreya, here, right? This is something you would easily agree with me, because this is something we do all the time. We look at someone who does slightly better than us, and then we emulate that person. We don't look down, rather we look up whom we can emulate. Okay, whereas the left ideology is something very different. Okay, left doesn't want to accept this reality. Okay, left wants to come up with victimhood narratives, and it says, if you have not done well as a community, it's not your problem as an individual, it's not your failure as a family, it's not your failure as a community. Okay, it's rather everything is externalized, and then somebody has been exploiting you. The white people have been exploiting you. Okay, this narrative has been drummed into the heads of people for nearly 20 years now, and it got really intense ever since Obama came to power, right, in 2008. Okay, since then, this became the norm. And then you have all these departments like, race studies, gender studies departments, and all of these who contribute nothing, okay, to upskilling the students. A kid could go to college for 4 years, study, and come out with zero skills. You won't hire that person. Okay, and whereas all they study is about gender and about opinions drummed into their head by the professors who themselves are incompetent. Okay, and these people, the only job they can find in the marketplace is to be professional agitators and activists. Okay, and that's what has happened in the United States. And what we are seeing is just one aspect of what is going to unfold in this country in the decades to come. Okay, today it's the Muslims, okay, and then the Hamas and Israel, and tomorrow, and in some other campus you'll find gender issues. They take the front seat, and then they agitate. Okay, so they look for issues where someone could play the victim, and they can agitate against society, and they can disrupt, and as a result of that, they can gain in the process. Okay, so this is, I think, the fundamental problem in the United States. Now, let's go back to the pro-Hamas protests that we are seeing in the university, right? Just wanted to set that bigger context for everyone, so that people don't think that, look, this has all of a sudden happened in a void. This did not happen in a void.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So this has been happening for a while, because if you go back to the textbooks, like, I was intimately involved in the California textbook lawsuit, and textbooks whitewash Islam, okay, and then they portray it as a religion of progress, a religion that cares for women, and all of these things. Okay, you would not hear a word about jihad. Okay, you will not hear one thing about what the Muslims have done to every other culture for 1400 years. But they'll portray Islam as a religion of peace. Okay, these things did not just happen in a void. These were an outcome of a very calculated strategy that has been going on for 20 plus years, so that the left can impose its worldview on society, and the two can come to power in the process. Okay, so now with that context, let's go back to the pro-Hamas protests. Okay, so I have been kind of meeting with a lot of these younger kids. Okay, so most of them college-going kids, some of them even high school kids. I just asked them one question. So what is your biggest concern? Is it that a lot of Gazan civilians or dying, or they have been displaced and they have become refugees in their own home? They say absolutely yes. And then usually comes the stock response, by the way, half of them are children. Okay. So my point is, well, fair argument, point taken. So this war can end in 2 minutes. Just two things need to happen. Number one, return all the hostages safely back to Israel. Then two, demand that Hamas surrenders on its knees before IDF. Okay. And all you have to do is to put pressure on Biden, because the Hamas leadership is hiding in Qatar. Okay, they are not fighting in Gaza. Okay, they are not fighting the IDF. They are sitting in Qatar, and each one of them, Honey, and all these guys, they have $3-4 billion of asset each. Okay, so and it's the emirs of Qatar who are protecting them, and then we see them. These guys openly travel to Turkey. They meet with the president of Turkey. Okay, and then they come back and then they strategize. And Iran recently revealed that they were behind the planning of October 7th. So it's very easy for President Biden to put pressure on Qatar and say, I'm going to freeze your funds. Because the US did it for Russia when Russia went to war with Ukraine. Okay, they could freeze the funds for the Qatar emirs. Okay, and then they say, hand over all the Hamas leadership. Otherwise, you're not getting your money back. Okay. In a matter of hours, those Hamas leadership, those top three, will be handed over to IDF. Okay, they will be brought to justice. And the moment you get the top leadership, the rest of Hamas will stop fighting. Okay, they will start surrendering. And this entire war will come to an end overnight. Why don't you do that? As soon as I bring up this point, that why don't you get Hamas to surrender? Why don't you demand that Biden put pressure on Qatar to get Hamas to surrender? These youngsters, these youth, they become hostile. Okay. And then they immediately say, oh, no, then, Hamas is not a terrorist organization. We don't support Hamas, but then Hamas is fighting for a good cause. Okay. And then their entire argument is, this problem did not start on the 7th of October when Hamas went in and killed 1,200 Israelis, which, by the way, is the equivalent of killing 42,000 people on 9/11 in the US, right? Once you adjust for the population. Okay. They say this problem goes back to 1948, to the formation of Israel. Okay. So because it has been drummed into their heads by their teachers.
These are American kids saying all this stuff, Venkat?
These are mostly American kids. Okay. But also, interestingly, some Indian kids too, who have been born and brought up in this country. And of course, all the Muslim kids, they say that, okay, regardless of where they are from. But very interestingly, I have never seen Chinese kids say this, and nor have I seen Chinese American kids participating in all these protests in American campuses. It is predominantly white kids, and of course, Muslim kids, and to some extent, Indian kids. But rarely ever have I seen Chinese kids. So, that is something the Chinese are doing right. Okay, the way they are bringing up their children, so their children are not getting sucked into all of these protests. Okay, so but a section of Indian kids, like you would have seen that Columbia University sloganeering, same thing in NYU where they were shouting this Azadi slogans and all these things in Hindi. Okay, so some of the Indian kids are getting sucked into that. Okay, so go ahead.
How do they explain the fact that from 2007 onwards, Hamas or the Palestinian Authority were given rule to the control to rule Gaza, whatever they wanted to do.
Right.
And what they did was, whatever resources they got from Israel and elsewhere, these were deployed in building tunnels and everything with a view to implementing from the river to the sea, Palestine will
Correct.
be free. People, you
Correct.
need to understand what that means. I'm not going to explain that here.
Yeah.
Now, if this was the goal, and the entire 2.7 million or 2.5 million, even 2 million of Palestinians that are living in Gaza, they all knew that. Why didn't anyone protest? In fact, the Hamas went about systematically eliminating the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority today is only in West Bank. Why? How can they explain all these things?
They don't. Okay, so this is why, what I realized very soon in the process was, a lot of the kids, these college kids or even the high school kids who are protesting, they have been brainwashed. Okay, so this is very, very similar to how the Muslim kids are brainwashed in madrasas. These have been brainwashed with opinions. Okay, they don't look at facts, and the moment you throw some fact that challenges their perception, it produces cognitive dissonance in them. Okay, at that moment they shut you off. They don't listen to you anymore, and they
Tune
walk
you
away.
out. Yeah.
Right, and then they walk away from there. In fact, I brought up the same questions. Right, the ones you asked, like for example, in 2005, 2006, when Israel vacated Gaza and went out, what was Gaza like? Okay, so we are only talking about what Gaza looks like after the buildings have been bombed. Okay, but before that, those buildings existed. Okay, and in fact, those buildings that existed in Gaza until 2005, 2006, they were far more advanced and far more sophisticated. The infrastructure was way better than what we had in Bangalore or Chennai or New Delhi at that time. Okay, so the roads were fantastic, the buildings were excellent. Okay, they had very good vineyards. Okay, in fact, that that amphora wines, right? In the old Greco-Roman world, they made wines in amphora. Okay, so those were the big vats in which they poured wine. They sealed it, they buried it into the ground. So some of those finest wines grew in those vineyards. They were in Gaza. Okay, so that place was a fantastic place. They handed it over. So anybody, so that was as good as giving them a Palestinian state or half of their own Palestinian state. They said, here it is, take it, do whatever hell you want with it. Okay, these guys could have simply played on the gullibility of Westerners, and they could have said, look, we have been oppressed all these years for 50, 60 years. Now we have got our own state. This is the Mediterranean coast. Please come to us. Okay, turn this into a tourist hub. Okay, that would have become a thriving tourist complex. They did not do that. Okay, and they could have invested in education because they got all the sympathy, all the funding from UN, from all the European countries and everybody. They did not. Instead, they built tunnels. They built madrasas. They brainwashed their kids. And if you look at, there are two very interesting statistics that came out, which I'm sure you are familiar with. One is after 10/7, October 7th attack, they carried out surveys sometime in December, and 71% of the Palestinians, okay, so 52% in Gaza and 89% in Palestinian Authority, they were supporting Hamas in spite of what had happened, in spite of all the bombing and all the suffering that had gone on. Okay, so they were firmly pro Hamas. Then second survey was, it was series of 6 surveys that were conducted between 2014 and 2020. Okay, Palestinians in Gaza as well as PA were repeatedly asked, if you got your own Palestinian state, if two state solution is implemented, would you guys take the chill pill? They said no. Okay, 50 to 60% of the people at any point in time said no, we will not calm down. This is only the beginning. We'll still continue the war. Okay, because that is where we need to understand what is really driving this. That's why I tried telling a lot of these youngsters when I talk to them. I tell them this problem did not start on 10/7, and then they get excited and they say, yes, this started in 1948. I said no, this started 1400 years ago. Okay, so when Islam was founded. Okay, and what is the manifesto of Hamas? Hamas manifesto says, it quotes Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, right? It says the day of the reckoning will not come until all the Jews have been killed by the Muslims. Then on the day of the reckoning, Jews will be hiding behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will call out, "Oh Muslims, come get the Jew. He is hiding behind me." Okay, so long as Muslims believe these are divinely ordained, okay, these are the words of their own prophet, and they have validity for all of time. Okay, they are only going to look at the Jews as eternal enemies and not seek reconciliation and peace. Then there is a second aspect of Islam. Unlike, this is something most white people simply don't understand because they have been so secularized that, they have been uprooted from many philosophical traditions. But very interestingly, even our own Hindu people don't understand this because they think Islam is just another religion like Hinduism. Okay, which is not the case. Okay, because in Islam, life begins at death. Okay, because the highest reward one can earn is to become a jihadi. Okay, and die in the battlefield carrying out jihad against the non-believer, and then the reward for that is the Jannat, where this person is going to get 72 virgins. Okay, and life of eternity with all the wine flowing and all that stuff. Okay, so this is the belief that drives them, and so long as someone's worldview is warped by this kind of death cult and the belief that accompanies it, okay, they are not going to live their life on this earth. Okay, they are going to look at the Jews as eternal enemies, because that's what Islam teaches. Okay, time and again it teaches that, and the Quran says the worst of the enemies are the Kafirs and Jews, and we are the Kafirs, and then the Jews are the Israelis, and then it teaches that it's a sacred duty to emulate the Prophet Muhammad and then to wage jihad. And then Muhammad did the same thing, right? Like the Battle of Khaybar and other things, he waged those battles. And that's why Muslims understand this very well. Okay, this is exactly the problem with non-Muslims and not the Muslims. Because if you looked at the protests in Germany, the protests in UK, the protests in New York and other places, the Muslims who were pro-Hamas, they were taking those huge rallies and they were shouting slogans, Hebar, Hebar, Ya Yehud, okay, which means Hebar, Hebar, remember Jews. Okay, what are they telling? Okay, they know the story fully well. That's why they are raising the slogan. The story is Muhammad attacks Hebar. It's a Jewish settlement. Okay, then he kills all the men there. Okay, and it's one of the most grotesque killing, because all the boys are stripped and whoever has pubic hair is killed. Okay, then by various accounts, 600 to 800 of those men are killed. It's a small settlement, and their women are taken as sex slaves and they are distributed. And one of them is the beautiful 17-year-old girl by name Safiya. She is distributed as a war booty to one of the jihadis. But then others get jealous because she is so beautiful. They come and tell Muhammad, oh, this girl is so beautiful, you should not have given her to another jihadi. So Muhammad goes, he ransoms her for 400 dirham, takes her and turns her into his own wife, and then, quote within quote, consummates the marriage the very same night. Okay, and that's a 17-year-old child, okay, whose father, husband, and brother had been all slaughtered the very same day in front of her eyes, and then she's raped the very same night. And this is a sanctified religious belief. Okay, now Islam teaches it's the job of a Muslim to emulate Muhammad, and this is the role model that Muhammad has set. So, as far as Muslims are concerned, Jews are always going to be eternal enemies, and Israel simply cannot exist. Okay, they won't calm down. That's why they shout without any reservation on the streets of Western countries, Hebar, Hebar, Ya Yehud. Okay, Hebar, Hebar, remember Jews, meaning what Muhammad did to the Jews and to their women, Safiya being their female representative, we can do to you. Okay, to the modern Jews in Europe or America. Okay, the problem is with the rest of the people who are being either useful idiots or paid propagandists. Okay, and then they join these protests thinking, because this gives them a chance to signal virtue, right? You know, oh, we are taking side with the Gazan people who are suffering in this war, without realizing, even if Israel said, okay, we don't want to fight, because Israel did that, right? In 2005, 2006, when they vacated Gaza, they said, done with you. Okay, you know, keep this place, keep all the buildings, keep all the greenhouses, keep all the factories, keep all the vineyards, do whatever hell you want. They went out of there. They did not want trouble, but Gazans wanted trouble. Okay, that's why they built tunnels. Okay, by various estimates, like 400 to 500 kilometers of tunnels. Okay, under every building. Okay, and then all the Gazan people, when 10/7, when that Shani Luke, that German Jewish girl, was raped, and then her naked body was brought back to Gaza, we saw the videos, right? These guys were celebrating, they're welcoming that, and then they were, spitting on that body of the poor 23-year-old girl who had been raped and butchered and everything, right? So this is the problem. So very few of the protesting kids in college realize what Islam is and what motivates Hamas and what motivates the Muslim sympathy for Hamas, and why they can never be peace between Jews and Muslims, or Israel and the Muslim states. It's not because of the Jewish people, okay, because Judaism is a much more diversified religion, okay, like, you know, Kabbalah and all these things are there, but then even otherwise, the Jewish people are a much more diversified people, because only a small section of them are uber conservative religious Jews. Majority of them are not. That's not the case with Islam. Okay, the problem is primarily with Islam. So long as Islam remains, this problem will never go away. It can either end in the complete eradication of Israel or the eradication of Islam and conversion of Muslims to modernity. It's one of the two.
Venkat, one question that keeps lingering and comes back to me is that, you know, these campus protests that are happening now, why now? What is the timing? Because I'll tell you why it's all wrong. First of all, it is now graduation season. All these campuses, they're getting ready to graduate the graduating seniors, and there is a feeling of having achieved something in life, to expect a bright future, that is getting disrupted. Second of all, the presidential elections are just around the corner, and
Right.
Biden administration has just about laid out the red carpet for these people. Why bite the hand that feeds?
So, uh, so this issue gets a bit. So today you would have seen the CNN headline, right? The UCLA protests, okay, and where some of these student leaders and then the protesters, activist type, they are coming and saying we are willing to pay the price. Okay, so this is only a small section of the student body, because the rest of them, obviously, like you said, they have normal aspirations. Okay, they want to, go ahead and they want to find a job. They don't want to get barred from employment opportunities and all these things. So why are those students participating in the protest? Okay, so that reason, the reason for that is, so I'll address both your questions. I'll next
Yeah,
come
yeah.
to, why during this election year, right, when it is this close to election. But the first question is, why are these students still protesting? Okay, so this happens for two reasons, right? One reason, like I said, there has been a heavy conditioning, okay, of one reason is the Muslim students. Okay, so there is a large body of Muslim students, okay, who are extremely fanatical, okay, despite coming to the US. And you would have seen some of the studies even in UK, that between the generation that came from Pakistan and other places to UK, the one that was born and raised in UK is more fanatical. They want the Sharia law, they want to put hijab on their women and all of these things, okay. So there is a radicalized section of Muslim students, and then they want to go ahead and protest, because for them it's unthinkable that the Jewish state would wage war against the Muslims and also defeat them in the process. Okay, so that is unthinkable for them. Okay, so they are motivated by that religious zeal. However, what about the rest of the people who are becoming useful idiots, right, and who are just joining them? So there, as much I feel angry towards them, I also pity them, because a lot of them have been brainwashed from their middle school, if not from the primary school. Okay, the prime culprits being the teachers. Okay, so these teachers have been indoctrinating them to signal virtue and to advertise their self-righteousness. Okay, and they're given them a template. Okay, you are self-righteous when you take the side of the Muslims. Okay, they have portrayed the Muslims as victims. Okay, you take the side of Muslims, you take the side of BLM, or you take the side of the transgender activists. Okay, and then you are self-righteous and you are on the right side. Okay, on the other hand, if you challenge any of these premises, then you are either an Islamophobe, or you are a genderphobe, or you are a racist, right? It's one of these things, okay? So these children have been conditioned from very formative years, from the time they were 10 or 11 or 12. And by the time they go to college, they carry this baggage with them, and they are not able to come out of that. And then any trigger, right, by these professional activists and then the professional protesters, these kids, they fall into the trap, and then from that it becomes difficult for them to extricate themselves. So this is one side of why they are protesting. Okay, now the question is, why is it happening during the election year? Okay, so in a way what you said is, they are biting the hand that feeds them. Okay, so but here is the challenge, right? So this entire Democratic Party, Biden represents what you can call the middle of the Democratic Party. Okay, so he still wants to appeal to the corporate base. Okay, he still wants to appeal to those blue collar Democrats and others, and also to the Christian segment of the Democratic Party. Okay, so because not every Christian votes for the Republicans, and there are a sizable chunk of Christians who vote for the Democratic Party, and then they vote for the likes of Biden. Okay, then there are also the independents, because at the end of the day, the elections are not decided either by the committed Democrats or by the committed Republicans, but by the independents who are willing to switch sides. Okay, so Biden appeals to those. Okay, however, there is a section of the Democratic Party which is highly socialist, okay, extreme left, and which is in bed with all of these Islamists, and which is frankly very anti-Semitic, right? Which is anti-Jew, because in their worldview, which is characterized by class warfare, the Jews are the dominant group. Okay, so the Jews or the oppressors. Okay, and then in the future they can replace the Jews, the Hindus with Chinese, with anybody else too. But today it's the Jews. The Jews are the oppressors, and the Muslims are the oppressed. Okay, so that's the narrative they have created. And then this group of the Democratic Party is not only represented by the Squad and by the likes of Bernie Sanders, but also by the younger voters. Okay, typically, the 18 to 25, 26 years of age, that voters who are in college or in high school or who have just graduated and have been working for a couple of years. Okay, so these are the people who constitute this extreme left of the Democratic Party, and since they have been conditioned to think that the Jewish people are the oppressors and Israel is the oppressive state, the apartheid state, and the Palestinians are the oppressed people, they are uh, raging that Biden has turned a blind eye to this and he has been supporting Israel and he has not done enough to fetch a ceasefire for them. Okay, so that's the reason I think this section has gone out of control. They cannot be reined in anymore by Biden. So that's why they have gone out and protested, and in a way, Biden is helpless about it. Okay, so that puts him in a serious quandary because now what it means is uh, either way, heads he loses, tails he loses. Okay, so if he continues to support Israel, then this extreme left, Islamic left combined, will go berserk. Okay, they will abstain from voting. The Muslims have already been threatening that in the swing states they are not going to vote; they are going to abstain. Okay, and that could make a significant difference to them. And then number two, if he, on the other hand, if he forces a ceasefire, okay, or holds back the hands of Israel, then he will lose the support of the Christians and then the blue collar Democrats who have been supporting Biden, as well as some of the independents, because many of the independents have not much of sympathy for the Islamists and the radical Muslims. Okay, so win heads or tail he loses. That's my reading at this stage.
Venkat, couple of questions. I mean, I'm sorry. I see your point, but I'm trying to get into the head of people like Bernie Sanders and George Soros. Both of these people are Jews.
Correct.
So they want to stick it to the Jews by sticking it to themselves. Is something doesn't. I mean, why are they having such self-loathing?
So this is something we have seen among our own Hindus too, a section of Hindus, right? There are Hindu leftists, right, who go to JNU and other places, okay? And then they'll be self-loathing Hindus, okay? For example, some of them will be Brahmins and then they'll be viciously anti-Brahmin, okay, in their public stances, okay? So then, or they'll be other so-called upper caste Hindus, but then they'll be the ones playing the caste card and, castigating Hinduism all the time, and they do that all the time. So in a way, what happens, this is, I think, some kind of a Stockholm syndrome. This is something not new. Okay, so I have written a lot about the Holocaust and the Jewish reaction to that. And then you would have read this book, Sunflower, by Simon Wiesenthal. Okay, so
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So what? I'll just give a gist of that. Okay, without going too many details. So Simon Wiesenthal and his wife are both coming out of the death camp. Okay, they survive. Okay, they both are survivors. Okay, and they both are sitting. Okay, and then they have been now rescued by the Allied forces. They're both sitting, and then his wife tells Simon that I want to forget everything. I want to have children. Okay, he replies, I want to have children, but I do not want to forget anything. Okay, I think we survived for a reason, to bring the perpetrators justice. Okay, then he narrates when he goes and he reaches out to the Jews who have escaped from the concentration camp and they've come to the US. Many of them are reticent. They don't want to talk about that. Okay, do you want to come out and testify? They say no. We don't want to talk. They turn hostile. Okay, they shut the door on him. And then there are others who go to extremes. Okay, they start blaming themselves. Okay, all of these things happen to us because we did not follow our religious teachings. Okay, so this is one section of them. So the self-loathing, I think, is an inevitable consequence of a people who have suffered a lot, okay, and then it's some kind of a coping mechanism for them, okay, some kind of Stockholm syndrome, and then now they can advertise their virtue, signal their virtue by identifying with the enemy. So that makes them look very generous and broad-minded, okay. There was also one such survivor, I forgot her name, and she went and embraced the commandant, okay, who used to torture her, okay. She was one of the twins, okay, who was put through that experiment, and then the camp commandant who tortured her, she went and embraced him, hugged him, and all these things, and called him her friend, okay. So this is a very strange mechanism. This is a psychological coping process. So there is a section of them by loathing themselves and by loathing their own community, signal virtue, and they want to be accepted by others, okay. And in a way they turn out to be useful idiots, but in the case of the likes of Bernie Sanders or George Soros and others, they also profit from this process.
Venkat, this has been one of those conversations where I really am blown away by the amount of data you have provided. Viewers, you may want to watch this thing again and again, because Venkat is like encyclopedic in his memory. And the point I think both of us are trying to say is there are things here that just don't make sense for 99% of the people. Don't get sucked in. Your parents have put in their life savings in some places to get you to these schools. You're paying a lot of money. Don't get sucked into this stuff. And whatever you may have been taught in high school and college, you need to get out of your silo and look at what the world is saying outside of your silo. The silo mentality has to change. First, that's what I would say. Forget, you don't have to take our word for it. Go out and search other people. Don't keep listening to others in the echo chamber and one of you just has an eruption. That's how you see all these extreme acts of violence. This has been the thing that I've been telling again and again, Venkat, and I'm hoping that some of the students who are watching this thing, please guys, you disagree with us, tell us why, because you need to back up your disagreements with facts, just like the way Venkat has, backed up with facts. Thank you once again, Venkat. I have no doubt in my mind, my friend, that we are going to be having several such conversations. This is important. This is important because we all are next in line.
May I add one more sentence to what you just said, because you made a very important appeal to the youngsters. I just wanted to, add on top of that. You have only 12 years of school and 4 years of college. Okay, some of you may proceed and do your PhD or anything, but then look at the world, right? We are living in. 15 years ago, you did not have a smartphone. Okay. Today, e-commerce dominates, okay, your entire ecosystem. Okay. So you are not ordering on DoorDash, you are not ordering on Uber, you are not ordering on Amazon 15 years ago. And today, that is your default. Okay. So this tells you something, right? The world, the way, the rate at which it's progressing, the way it is shaping up, okay, you have to acquire all the skills so that you can be successful in the future. Okay. You can be a useful citizen and you can thrive yourself, right? And one of the objectives of life is to be prosperous yourself, even if you want to do good to society, okay? And your high school and your college are the places where you are going to learn all the foundational skills. You are not going to ever go back and learn calculus when you are 35 or 40, okay? You are not going to learn your linear algebra when you are 45 or 50. You are not going to go back and learn the basics of genetics and all the phylogenetic tree structures and everything when you are 50, 55 years of age. Okay. This 4 years in college, like, Shreya here mentioned, your parents have paid a ton of money, or even if you got scholarship, you earned it. And this is the 4 years where you want to maximize. You want to spend most of your time in the libraries, most of your time talking to your professors, building real skills. Okay. Real skills, it could be in finance, it could be in, it could be in economics, it could be in linguistics, it could be in computing, it could be in STEM. But build these skills. Don't become an activist, because it doesn't take much skills to become an activist. And anyone could become an activist, and all you have to do is one day recognize you have been a failure in everything else in life. Now you have to go and work for an NGO or become an activist, and if you are condemned for that destiny, it will happen to you. But that's not something you should invite. So use your 4 years in college to acquire real skills, because the simple reason is that today's world is a borderless world. Right? The kids in China, the kids in Manila, the kids in India are competing with you. Okay. And those kids, if they are not wasting their time in these kind of useless protests. And if they are spending their time, perfecting their programming skills, perfecting their mathematics and statistics, they are going to replace you in Wall Street and Silicon Valley. This is going to happen. And if you don't want this to happen to you, then don't join this activist brigade.
Thank you so much, Venkat. And viewers, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.